us now is Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. First, Mr. Secretary, congratulations on the record time you put this together, particularly versus 2007, 2009. When will the checks be in the mail?
Well, Jim, first of all, thanks for having me back, and I want to thank the Senate for their swift action. People literally worked round the clock for 5 days, and the President and I and others couldn't be more pleased with the absolute unanimous support on a bipartisan basis to get this done. In regards to the checks, I announced yesterday from the White House press conference, first of all, most of these will be direct deposits, so we call them checks in the mail, but most of them will be direct deposits. It'll be within 3 weeks. We are determined to get money in people's pocket immediately, so that will be within 3 weeks.
No issues with the House? We don't have to worry about that? Can they hold it up?
I would hope that the House passes this unanimously. I've already reached out to the Speaker and to Kevin McCarthy on the sense of urgency. The American workers and American public and American business, they need the money now. So this is not the time to debate a bill that passed with every single vote, other than the few people who couldn't be there in person.
You know what, Mr. Secretary, when I go through the bill, what I keep finding, and it struck me, is that you told us at the very beginning this is going to be like business interruption insurance, that this is going to be about small and medium-sized business. I tried very hard to try to discredit that, and I couldn't. It's really true. There's very little about corporations. There's very much about the small and medium size. And you added the 1099, which I know is the new economy, the gig economy. Can you find all these people to give them the money? Because this is a very complicated task to give all these people the money, because you delivered. It goes to the people, not to the companies.
Well, Jim, you're right. The majority of this bill is all about small business and American workers. And we wanted to include in the definition of small businesses, as you said, the new gig economy, sole proprietorships. So between the small business retention loans, again, which is about 50% of the payroll, for companies that don't qualify that, there's retention tax credits that they get for retaining people. And then hopefully for the small number of people that are laid off, there is enhanced unemployment insurance. And again, this is something that we hope only lasts a short period of time. But the president wants to make sure that all American workers are protected. They did nothing wrong. This was an act of the government for medical reasons to shut down parts of the economy. And as the Fed chair said, we had a very, very healthy economy. We will have a healthy economy. We will win this war, as the president says, against this virus.
Page 640 has some excellent stuff about, we finally get this, the Department of Defense military. Some nice allocations to them. When I read what's happening in Elmhurst, which is New York for people all over the country, to me it says you've got defense procurement. You're going to get some protection gear. How quickly can you operate on the parts of this bill that are about making our country safe, not just be out in paychecks, which I think is marvelous, but using all this money with the Defense Department to make it so that we match up the areas that are in trouble with the help they need?
Jim, the president has made clear to every single cabinet secretary that has a responsibility, this is about, in capital words, fast. That getting money or getting action 3 or 4 months from now doesn't do anybody any good. So I can assure you the president and the vice president's task force will be working to make sure every cabinet moves fast on whatever provisions they have in this bill.
David? Secretary Mnuchin, we knew the jobless claims number was not going to be a good one, but I am curious as to what your thoughts were when you saw that 3.283 million number this morning.
You know, to be honest with you, I just think these numbers right now are not relevant. And, you know, whether they're bigger or smaller in the short term, you know, I mean, obviously there are people who have jobless claims. And again, the good thing about this bill is the president is protecting those people. So, you know, now with these plans, small businesses hopefully will be able to hire back a lot of those people. Last week, they didn't know if they had protections. They didn't have any cash. They had no choice. Now with this bill passed by Congress, there are protections. And as I said, hopefully those workers will be rehired. But between these 3 programs, it protects all of American workers. And by the way, you know, lots of big companies do continue to hire for obviously grocery stores, pharmacies, you know, delivery services. These companies are on overtime. So I know they're hiring people as fast as they can.
Yeah. The Fed is obviously a very important part of this overall plan, Mr. Secretary. Chair Powell was on the Today Show this morning talking about his views of the economy. How closely are you working with him, and what are your expectations in terms of the Fed taking that, $500 billion and turning it into perhaps as much as $4 trillion in direct lending? How is that going to work?
Well, I think, for the last few years, the Fed chair and I speak on a regular basis. Even in normal times, we'd always make sure we met once a week, and in many times we'd speak multiple times a week. I can tell you there's not a day that goes by now that he and I don't speak. Sometimes it's 5 times, sometimes it's 30 times. But he and I are coordinating very closely. The way the 13.3 program works, the Fed makes a request to me as Secretary of Treasury. I have approved every single one of those requests. I can assure you that the Fed and Treasury will work together very, very closely, and we both have the same objectives: to protect American workers and protect American companies. And I must say I applaud the Fed, even outside the 13.3 program, and their swift actions supporting the mortgage-backed securities market. This is about ordinary Americans getting mortgages. I also applaud FHFA, lifted certain provisions for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to buy mortgages. So this is an entire government plan to kill this virus. The president said this is a war, and we're going to win it quickly.
30 times a day, Secretary Mnuchin? That has to be a pretty bad day, doesn't it? I mean, what in the world are you talking about 30 times in one day?
No, not a bad day at all. It just shows that there could be times when we're coordinating. I've consulted, when we were going through these negotiations on issues that impacted 13.3. I consulted with the Fed chair constantly to make sure he was aware of the language, and we were both on board. So some of these were just technical situations. A lot of time it could be just exchanging market information and what we're both seeing in the market. And again, these are the times when, the Fed and Treasury, we each have different responsibilities, but we coordinate and act together.
All right, Mr. Secretary, economic stabilization and assistance to severely distressed sectors of the U.S. economy. Page 513 to page 540 is really the live or die part, where you get to choose where the money goes. Not more than $25 billion available to make loans, guarantees for passenger air carriers. What is the philosophy that you're going to have about what industries really need protection, what industries you may have to give equity to, and then finally, what industries are going to make it so that it isn't just when the smoke clears that we have an economy run by Walmart, Costco, Home Depot, Amazon, and maybe Lowe's and Target, because I'm worried about when we get through this that some live, some die, and I got to be sure that you got the right priorities because the world's looking towards you.
Well, Jim, let me make a couple of points. First of all, both the Republicans and the Democrats supported full transparency in what we're doing. So when we do take actions either through our direct program or through our programs with the Fed, there will be disclosures to the American public much faster than they would normally occur. So we very much support. This is a lot of money, and we support full transparency. I would also say there are 2 different programs. There is a program that where we can do things direct out of Treasury that is focused on the airlines and companies that have national security interests. So one of the things the president wanted to make sure, if there are certain companies that do pose national security interests to the United States, we have flexibility on that. And then the 13.3 programs with the Fed are broad-based programs. Everything from, the Fed has announced a corporate bond, both primary and secondary, that we put up capital already through capital we had with the Exchange Stabilization Fund even before this bill was passed, as well as they've already announced we'll be working with them on a Main Street lending program. So there will be transparency, and this will be broad-based for many, many businesses to be able to participate.
Curious to know, when I look at the bill in its entirety, what it says to me is one thing that I think is missing that I know you can provide, because this is an incredible bipartisan act. Can you challenge American business to keep people on the payroll, particularly the larger public companies. Make them give a pledge to the country that they will do everything they can to keep as many people on, like a Cisco that just did it yesterday, a Salesforce that did it, a Win. We need that optimism, and you can provide it.
Jim, you know, we don't believe in mandating and regulating certain big businesses. We did put restrictions on where companies take transactions. There'll be restrictions on share buybacks and equity comp and dividends. But I can tell you, I have been on the phone constantly. The president has had multiple conversations with all the different industries. And I can tell you, all the big companies I hear from are doing everything they can to support their employees, their commitment. I would even tell you, although the bill we passed last week on protecting people who need to have sick leave for small businesses, mostly all the existing big companies have already come out and said they will either participate on that basis or more generous terms. So I think the big companies are doing everything they can and understand the commitment to the American worker.
I think that's terrific. One thing that was hard for me in the bill to understand is what is the actual forbearance? Is there forbearance for landlords for the people who live in a studio and live in a one bedroom and they've got 5 kids in there? Is there forbearance for the cheesecake just yesterday said, just use that as a metaphor, they can't pay their rent bills? Forbearance, what does it mean, sir? And what does it mean also for all the mortgage securities out there that are so difficult to understand that we have to unravel? Can people stay in their homes if they can't pay their rent?
Jim, I want to commend Mark Calabria, who oversees the FHFA, which, as you know, is the primary regulator for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and also Secretary Carson, who oversees HUD and FHA. And prior to this bill being passed, they both put out guidance allowing for forbearance and putting a temporary hold on mortgage foreclosures, evictions. So what this bill does is basically just write into law what those two people had already announced. And again, I want to commend them. They didn't wait for Congress to act. They came out last week, and they already made these protections for American homeowners. We understand that, again, during this short period of time, homeowners need relief, and that's what those two individuals had already provided.
Mr. Secretary, I know you've got to go. I want to thank you. This is a real good bill, and it's a great start. And I wish you the best of luck, and so does the country. Secretary Mnuchin, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Bye.